that would be it. So maybe the schools pay them better.
Yeah.
There are some. I'll have to ask because they mentioned we have two here. Woodbridge has had it now.
A chance to size somebody
And you're
up.
right. Yeah. But there's always
Pretty good. Hey, well.
So, hey, you want to be on? It's
You know what
recording.
you're doing is? Don't you see and listen to him enough? You're going to record him too? Spending every nickel of it, but
I have a case of rotten eggs.
I guess tomatoes.
He's going to give us our speech.
Immediately, this connection was made.
Then I got some rotten eggs.
Okay, we're expecting this to come off without a hitch.
Of course, yeah. You want a copy?
Yeah, okay.
First meeting, Bethany Historical Society, October 19th, 1993, 8 o'clock p.m.
Hello, Penny.
Can't you find this?
I would go Ray, but I don't want to.
So we weeks when you don't want to get it. This is old, but then Christmas time. Last year was my
I got an 87 S10 now.
Janice,
This is quite a surprise. I expected anywhere between 12 and maybe 50. This is great. Really appreciate it. And it's nice to know that we're on the right track. Somebody wants to. There is no mic. You say you want me to speak loud? This is the first meeting of the Bethany Historical Society. And being the first meeting, we don't have any minutes from the last, and we don't have a treasurer's report. But what I'd like to do is call on our nominating committee, if he's available.
This is a slate we came up with. For President, Timer Downs, a term of 3 years. For Vice President, Hiram Carrington, a term of 2 years. Treasurer, Robert Brinton Sr., term of 2 years. And a Secretary, Edward Sapiga, term 1 year. And for Directors, Bob Brinton Sr., term 3 years. Alice Button, term 2 years. And Isabel Anderson, term 1 year.
Yes, Jeff.
Timer, I would move that the slate be accepted as presented and the secretary be instructed to cast one ballot.
Second to that, all in favor? Opposed or what? Passed. Secretary takes such action. I would like to introduce the officers, and personally, it's an honor to be here. I'm sort of overwhelmed. Let's start with Vice President. Hi, Carrington. Stand up high. Good evening. Our Secretary, Ed. Jr. And our directors are Bob Sr. A little of the background on why we're here and what got us going. Mainly it falls on one person, Bob. He's been bugging people around the town hall for a long time. We need something, let's get something going, will you work on this kind of thing? And we went ahead and started our first meeting on May 18th, 1993, which was only a few months ago. And each of our meetings showed us the need and the size of the task ahead of us. But it sort of enforced us that we do need a Bethany Historical Society. And obviously a lot of you agree with us. Our mission, if you want to call it that, would probably be best summed up by Judge Jerry Barnett's wording in our certificate of incorporation. I'll just read you Articles 1, 2, and 3. Article 1, the name of the corporation is Bethany Historical Society Incorporated. Article 2, the period of the existence of the Bethany Historical Society Incorporated shall be perpetual. Article 3, the activities to be conducted by the Bethany Historical Society Incorporated and the purposes to be promoted and carried out by it are: A, to bring together people interested in history, archaeology, anthropology, and related disciplines, especially as such pertain to the town of Bethany, County of New Haven, Ward State of Connecticut. B, to discover, acquire, own, collect, preserve, and display records, books, manuscripts, and other writings, charts, maps, deeds, journals, as well as paintings, prints, photographs, aboriginal relics, material objects that will help portray the life, condition, events, and activities of the people in the town of Bethany and in the county of New Haven, state of Connecticut, past and present time. C, perpetuate the memory and spirit of the men and women of Bethany who will become known or remembered for their individual accomplishments or for their civic virtue. D, to encourage historical research related to the town of Bethany and also the county and the state of Connecticut, and to disseminate the same through oral and written preparations. E, to mark historical buildings, sites, and trails, and to awaken or stimulate public interest in such buildings, sites, and trails. I can't add much to that. That's Judge Barnett's rendering. I'd like to encourage each of you to join us, put down your interests, what committees you'd like to serve on, things like that. I think in the future, seeing the size of this meeting, that a lot of our meetings are going to be committees. Committee to handle this, that, and so forth. And it won't be a big collection like we have tonight. Remember, one of the things that was on the little chart there, the charter members would be those who joined before December 31st. So if you know somebody that's not here that's interested in joining us, or you want to be a charter member, tell them to get going. They have a couple months. I'd also like to remind you that several books on Bethany for sale over here. And Bob wanted me to remind you that Christmas is coming. It's a good time to pick up some of those. Some of the future things that we can see for the organization are subjects like the old schools, the airport, the history of the fire department. It's almost unlimited what we can do. Even things like Litchfield Turnpike. And what we would like to do at the present time, if something changes our mind, is to keep it for local subjects with local speakers. And I think we've got an awful lot right here in town that all of us can pick up from that. I'd like to give out a few acknowledgments. Number one, Bob Brinton, our Spark Plug mission, whatever you want to call it. I don't know where he was in 1832, but we sure could have used him then. He wouldn't be here tonight, probably. And when I'm on Bob, I should include his whole family. Got Willie back there, Bob Jr. over there, the lady that fed us at all the meetings, Jan. So, really appreciate it. And then we have Judge Barnett, gave us all our legal advice. Certificate of incorporation, our bylaws, and he's working on our tax exempt status with the federal government and the state government. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Edie, Alice, Isabel Anderson, Ed Sapega, Ike Carrington, and a few others that got this ball rolling. And we didn't mean, by keeping this group small, to exclude a lot of you, but in order to fit into Britton's house, we had to have town move. We thank you again. Also, I'd like to thank the Bethany Lions Club. They came out of the woodwork and gave us money to start this, mailing and so forth, financial support, and that was really appreciated. Okay, I would like to, at this time, there's no other new business, introduce our speaker. Amen. And that goes right back to number one man again, Bob Brinton.
No, I don't need that. First of all, I'd like to thank you again for coming. I can't tell you how gratified I am to see the turnout here. We have well over 100 people that have turned out, and I think it indicates that there's a lot of interest in Bethany history. And you know, I think this bodes well for the future. Tonight's topic is best to be described as a work in progress. That's when you don't know as much about something as you'd like to or you should, but that won't stop. Topic is Bethany's roads, the system of roads, something about the names of the roads. Why roads? Why are we interested in roads? Well, it seems to me there's a growing interest and a growing recognition that roads serve a function other than just to enable one to get from point A to point B. And I know most of us drive along and we're looking at the line in the road or the kind of dull asphalt that looks about the same as it does in Ohio or California or anywhere else. But if you look beyond that, to the views along the road, to the road itself, the areas between the pavement, if you're going to ignore the pavement, I think there's a lot to be seen. Most of these photographs that you're going to see tonight were taken by my son, Will. I took only one and he wouldn't accept it. He rejected it. A few were taken by Don Menzies from the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society, standing in the back. Okay, again, why roads? Well, I think we're beginning to recognize that roads serve a couple of other functions. Roads are open space. They're land dedicated in perpetuity to the public. They can't be built upon. We're free to use them without without any restrictions whatsoever, except perhaps that you keep your speed within the posted limits. We think about some of the large open spaces in town, like the Naugatuck State Forest has over 620 acres. Yet, when you take the Bethany roads, both the state and the town roads, you have over 620 acres of land. It enables you to go places that you might not otherwise be able to go. And I think you're going to see that in a moment. The other thing I want you to keep in mind, and I'm hoping you kind of go away here with a little different point of view, is that in addition to being open space, roads are really part of our heritage. When you look at some of the few early maps that I have, you're going to realize that except for the recent subdivision roads that have been built since World War II, Bethany's road system has virtually not changed in the last 200 years. The roads that you're driving today, the town roads and even the state roads, are the same ones that our ancestors drove on. We're still driving between the same pair of stone walls. Okay, well, you want to get that started? If you get the door, I think everybody's in that's going to be in. And someone's going to have to get the lights. All right, we're going to start off here. This happens to be Sperry Road, and why are we looking at West Rock? Well, because it's part of our town. A question came up yesterday about what is associated with Bethany, and to me, hills comes to my mind immediately. The first book written about Bethany is called Bethany and Its Hills. Am I your way, by the way, anybody? Everybody can hear me? Yeah, that's the problem. Okay. The hills are kind of a hindrance. They caused it to be difficult for the settlers to make the kind of roads that perhaps could be made in more level areas, for instance, near the shore. And the difficulty of building roads and the way our roads were built has something to do with the kind of town we have today. This is why we don't have skyscrapers and factories, and we'll get to that in a while. I kind of like this sign. This was given to me by Allie Wooding, something that had been in her family's house. I imagine something that Will Wooding had painted in the 20s and it never quite got put up. And she didn't have any idea where it was intended to go. But I think it's a good way to start off. And talking about roads is open spaces and allowing you to go to places where you otherwise would not be able to go. The Downs Road Causeway leading into Bethany. And we're standing just about on the Bethany-Woodbridge town line looking into Bethany. This is just a beautiful area. The slide doesn't really do justice to it. This is an early town road. This probably, at least for use by people who live there, this certainly goes back to the beginnings of the 18th century. By the way, very little work, very little research has been done on roads in Bethany in the 18th century. And you're not going to find me telling you too much because it just hasn't been done yet. But this particular road is, you can see a biker on here, is used extensively by bicyclists. I don't know how many of you have ever been up here on a Saturday to see the people coming out from New Haven. Even our town seal features a road. Amity Road, maybe one of the earliest roads in Bethany. This is probably the mode of transportation used by people in Bethany back 150 years or more ago. A very handsome, primitive farm wagon. This particular photograph was taken on the early farm on Bear Hill Road. And to show you the kind of interest people had in the old days, this is very carefully marked, Joe and Dutch. The driver remains unidentified. We were largely based on transportation that was tied to the horse in the early days. A single horse with a rider, more likely a farm wagon. Later on, carriages, but very few people had carriages. Certainly in the 18th century, it's reputed that the first person to have a carriage in Bethany was Isaac Sperry about 1800. So to have a carriage, you'd have to be fairly wealthy. Even in the period when Bethany was a town incorporated, you find very few people who had carriages. And we can tell because they were taxed on them. You know, tax the rich or something like that. Well, if you had a carriage, you were taxed. If you had a wagon, no. But a carriage was a luxury. A carriage or a watch or something like that showed that you had more wealth than maybe somebody thought you deserved. These church sheds I wanted to show because they're a relic of that period. And this is something unique about Bethany. To the best of my knowledge, this building is the only one of its kind in Connecticut. This is a church shed. It was built to house wagons and in the wintertime sleighs to keep them dry while people were in the church. And remember, in the early days, church services were extremely long, or at least they seemed that. This is a kind of a little treasure. This early map, dating from perhaps as early as 1766, shows some roads in Bethany, and that's the reason that it's here. There are earlier, no, take it back, this is 1792. There are earlier maps, but they really don't show roads. But this late 18th century map shows a road going from southeastern Bethany to northwestern Bethany. If I can make this darn thing work, and if I could read the map, I know it's not great. This is the meeting house in Woodbridge, because remember, this was back in the days when there was a theocracy. The church and state were one. So the center of the town was the church. And this is the original meeting house in Bethany, probably up at Dayton Road. And this was probably the Episcopal Church located at Church Corner, which was the corner of Tuttle Road and Carrington Road. Now just a field. And the road that you see going between them, which I can hardly see, so you probably can't see it either, basically is going to go diagonally, that's better, from southeast to northwest. This was called a county road, and more research probably needs to be done on this, but it was the earliest road that was laid out, and it follows part of what is now, or most of what is now, Amity Road in Bethany. Remembering, those of you who've been here for a few years, remember Amity Road used to stop at Litchfield Turnpike. This is another important road in town because it marks a boundary. This is Pole Hill Road looking north, as I recall, from Johnson. It's important because it marks the dividing line between the Milford Colony and the New Haven Colony. So those of you who live east of Pole Hill Road are living in an area that came from New Haven, area that was purchased from the Indians of that area. West of Pole Hill Road, I guess it's the Pagusset Indians that sold land. So you might be in some jeopardy. But perhaps not too much. This map of Bethany, which was made in 1934 as a WPA project for our newly built community school, and serves as a cover for Bethany sketches and records, shows you basically our early grid. This is the network of roads as they were laid out in the 18th century. And if you look carefully, I know it's not a great map for that particular purpose, you'll notice that you're going to recognize roads. If you look, you're probably looking where your road is in your house. Most people do. I know I would. And you're going to find out that the roads are not too much different from what we find today, excluding the newer subdivision roads. I kind of like the the position of the stump here at the end of Falls Road on top of the Beacon Heights landfill. The artist here certainly was able to foresee the future. This particular road is a characteristic road, probably, of what such roads probably look like in the 18th century. This is a small section of Carrington Road, north of the Eisenman's house. And it's a lovely area, but just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about roads. Certainly no better than that, probably nowhere near as good as that. I felt that they really had a lot of gravel to apply to roads and a lot of time to do it. This is an early manuscript map. You're going to see a few maps here that have never been seen by the public. This is from the archives of the M.P. Woodbridge Historical Society. And it's no more than a sketch map, yet it shows down here Pond Lily, where the mobile station is, and Amity Road and Litchfield Turnpike converge. This is probably Bradley Road. It's not really to scale, but it does show Downs Road, and it does show Carrington Hill, which Downs Road is the foot of Carrington Hill. I don't know how many of you have heard of that name, but when I was a youngster, we very often got mail addressed simply to Brinton, Carrington Hill, Bethany, and it always got there. We don't use Carrington Hill much anymore. We're a little more specific. Now we go by road and house numbers and zip codes, and it still doesn't get there. But anyway. The western road, of course, is Amity Road, and this is a junction where Tuttle Court is today. That's where Amity Road ended. And those the old timers remember that, I guess I don't have to be too old a timer, you remember that this was Amity Road was the concrete road or the cement road. Everybody said, well, is it the cement road or the other road? Well, the two roads are Litchfield Turnpike and Amity Road. Amity Road was the upper road, Litchfield Turnpike was the lower road. Amity Road was the cement. You live on the cement. This house, located on what is now Route 42, is a beautiful old house, site of the toll gate on the Litchfield Turnpike. The turnpike, for any of those who have been on the turnpike and gone through Massachusetts or some other state where they're still charging toll, is a place where you have to pay toll. And the Litchfield Turnpike was such a place. A pike is a pole, and the turnpike is something you turn to allow someone to pass with their horse or carriage or whatever vehicle they had after they've paid the toll. Much as when you go through a toll gate today, a little arm goes up and lets you pass. This is climbing on Carrington Hill. Near the top of Carrington Hill, where the Bethany line is at the new layout of Litchfield Turnpike. I have this in here, even though this was in a foreign town, Woodbridge. There were mile markers like this all along important roads, like the Litchfield Turnpike. This one is a 6.5-mile marker, long since gone, probably destroyed when the turnpike was improved and widened in the 1920s. There still is a pair of mile markers at the house that owned by Dr. Payne in Woodbridge, across from Clark Road. You might notice that someday. It's very, very few around. There are 2-mile markers. One gives a distance to New Haven, and one gives a distance to Litchfield, because the Litchfield Turnpike was an investor-built and owned business with the intention of providing a good surfaced road from the New Haven courthouse to the Litchfield courthouse. It was very important to get from the inland parts of Connecticut to the coast. And the turnpikes were the answer to that. Turnpikes were made a lot of money in the early days. Then canals came along, and then railroads. Well, we didn't have any canal at Bethany, but we did have one not that far away in Hamden, Farmington Canal. But that didn't last very long. And pretty soon, by the middle of the 19th century, we had twin railroads railroads, one to the east of Bethany in Hamden, following the old canal line, one following the Naugatuck River, and the turnpikes just kind of dried up. They went out of business. They didn't make any money anymore, and the towns along the turnpikes kind of became backwaters. And one reason why Bethany isn't a big metropolitan district today is because the railroads just kind of passed us by. I'm kind of glad of it. Another comment before I go on about this particular mile marker. It's just below, about a half a mile below the junction with Downs Road today. Remember we said Downs Road was a 7-mile marker? Well, this is a 6.5-mile marker. There was a house, and very often horses were added to the stagecoaches. By 1820, there were regular daily stagecoach travel on the turnpike through Bethany. I know we look at films and we see westerns, and we see, well, look at the people in stagecoaches, how primitive. It never occurs to us that this took place right in our town. And what's even more surprising is it took place in our town up until 1907. The last stagecoach to run on the Litchfield Turnpike was 1907, according to Tyler Davidson's journals. In reference again to this particular spot, according to a diary kept by Arthur Doolittle, stages stopped at this point and added horses. And the reason was they had to climb up Carrington Hill, and very often the stages had, in addition to just to passengers and freight, they also would have several wagons hooked on the back in order to deliver them to somewhere to the north. New Haven was a great manufacturing area for wagons and buggies, and that's how they delivered them. Today you'd have a carrier for cars. Well, this is how they did it in the old days. I promised I'd be brief. You can see it's not working. This is something very interesting. Maybe some of you have driven by this spot on the Litchfield Turnpike. Right in front of Russ Winter's house, just north of Munson Road. This old riveted tank is a horse watering trough. It's the last one left in Bethany. There's still another one similar to this on the back of Shepherd's Stone Wall. It got moved when they widened the road, but the structure's still there. And water would have been piped out from the spring, and this would have been kept available for horses. I understand there was a wooden one located at the corner of Rainbow Road and Carrington Road. The town of Bethany paid to maintain watering troughs up until 1923. I know that because the town reports show that the town expended $9 every year for 3 watering troughs. And generally the person that lived near it took care of it, which means I suppose took the sticks out of it and just make sure it was in good working condition. It's hard to know how a watering trough can get out of commission. This very early manuscript map is difficult to see. I won't spend a lot of time on it. It's dated 1817. You're probably the first people to have ever seen this publicly. This is a photograph of the map that I took out of the vault of the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society. It's the only half of the map. This shows the Bethany-Woodbridge line. The part below it shows the old Dead Man's Curve. I don't know how many of you remember Dead Man's Curve on the Litchfield Turnpike before the road was changed in the late 50s. Just below the Bethany town line was a terrible curve, and there were weekly accidents. Hardly a week would go by without the post being knocked down. A number of people lost their lives before that was straightened. What's interesting here is this is called the Straits Turnpike Road, and the Straits were the narrow area between the two rock outcroppings at the northern end of town, where Amity Road, what's now Amity Road, goes toward Naugatuck by the line over the property, just past Edwards Road, in the vicinity of Edwards Road. This calls it the Shun Pike. That's Amity Road. It's the Shun Pike. Shun is to avoid. These are the toll dodgers. Use this a lot. None of you would do anything like that. But in those days, Sometimes people would use an alternate route that would enable them to get around the toll gate. The toll gate that they tried to get around was the one down Flats on Litchfield Turnpike, just north of Bradley Road. By going up this turnpike, following part of the old county road where it intersected with Litchfield Turnpike, you escaped one of those tolls. You still had to pay a toll up here where it says gate. I don't know if you can read it. That says gate. And we already showed you where that was located. You'll notice there's kind of a straight section of road here. Extremely straight. For a road that was laid out in the 18th century, I don't know if you've thought about it or not, but Amity Road is extremely straight. There's only one little crook in it down here. You see right there? And that is the location of present-day Old Amity Road. In the early 1930s, when the state straightened the road, they just straightened that little section right there and left Old Amity. But outside of that, look at how straight it is, except for this curve. And then in the 60s, the state straightened this out, ran a road through there, and left Grant Road as a little town road. And this is Amity Road in the vicinity of the police barracks, looking south, and it's incredibly straight. If you think about it, obviously the hill where the churches are located is in the way, but if you leveled this out, you'd be able to see at least to Luke Hill Road. Absolutely focused here. One of the things that was necessary on the turnpike was to provide accommodations for people, food and drink. This happened to be the Perkins Hotel. There were others. There was a Smith Hotel just north of Davidson's Corner on the old Litchfield Turnpike. This hotel stood at the northwest corner of Beacon Road and Litchfield Turnpike, burned in 1903. This somewhat later hotel, which gained an unsavory reputation, some of which you evidently are familiar with, served as a speakeasy in the 20s, as well as a sometime house of ill repute. All part of the history. We have to tell it, warts and all. We have to tell you. It burned in the 1930s. I really doubt that anybody tried to put the fire out very hard. I understand the town fathers kind of watched it and felt it was probably a good thing. Never rebuilt. This map is the earliest map that has any degree of accuracy that I know of that shows all of the Bethany town roads in grid as we know. This dates from 1852, and it's part of a wall map. And again, you're probably going to look for your own house, but there's no road there that you would find unfamiliar. By the same token, if anybody came back from 200 years ago, they wouldn't have any trouble getting from Miller Road to Carmel Road. They wouldn't have any trouble. They use all the same roads that they would have used in those days. A little bit here about what kind of roads we're talking about. This little photograph, I kind of like it. It shows the old Center Schoolhouse, which stood about in the location of our Center Firehouse at the end of Peck Road. I think it shows you a little bit about what the road looked like. It was just a little dirt road with some ruts in it. This is kind of charming because it was taken from the seat of a buggy. You can see the shafts and the traces and the whip show up in the foreground. Our little 1834 schoolhouse looks much the same as it does today, right here at the end of the driveway. Very, very little change, except it did a bit of moving. Another indication of what the town roads look like. This happens to be a picture of the Holy House. It was taken by George Levi Whitting about 1900, probably no later than 1901. No automobile had ever been in Bethany at this time. There are no car tracks here. They're simply wagon tracks. You can't see Hilldale Road, but you can see the entrance to Falls Road. Very narrow road. Big grassy island. This is hard to tell, but if you look at some of these photos, you'll see the fields are just wide open. You can see for miles, literally, in back of some of these buildings. This is another photograph taken also by George Levi Wooding. It's done with a little different film. That's why you get that sepia tone. But it shows very clearly what Hilldale Road, present-day Hilldale Road, looked like. Hilldale Road was not called Hilldale Road at this time, however. That's a fairly modern name. As a matter of fact, most roads in town didn't have any names in the old days. Or at least if they did, nobody ever used them. They don't appear in deeds. They don't appear in town meeting minutes. They just don't appear. If you wanted to talk about a road, you talked about the road that led from so-and-so's house to so-and-so's house. You never gave it a name. The only exception to that is I think you're going to find shortly, I have another map, and of the whole town, it only has 2 roads, and one of them's wrong. One of them is Bear Hill Road, which is correct, and the other one is they mix up Carrington Road and Litchfield Turnpike. Well, people are still doing that. How many people have said, gee, I can't figure it out? They're trying to follow Route 69, they can't figure out it changes from Litchfield Turnpike to Carrington Road. Well, that even happened in the old days. Up here, just barely visible, to you invisible probably, is a road sign that says, with an arrow that says Mount Carmel. I mean, if you want to go to Mount Carmel, that's the way you went. And this is an old iron sign. I only know of one that's still remaining. Didn't tell the name of the road, remember. It only said Mount Carmel. Some of the changes that took place in Bethany roads, and there were very few of them before the turn of the century, was this particular rerouting of Hatfield Hill Road east of the Litchfield Turnpike. And this particular section had to be moved because the water company in 1892 bought up the land in the West River Valley and flooded this area, built this handsome dam. They covered up an area where there was an earlier dam with a nail works. When people used these roads, they not only used them by horse. If we're talking about the 1890s now, there was a bicycle craze, maybe similar to the one we have today. And people came out from the city, also temperance craze. And one of the things they could do is they could take their bikes out and they could come out and refresh themselves at a location like this. This is also 1900. This is taken at the corner of Bethway Road and the Litchfield Turnpike. Okay. After the turn of the century, we got a big change in Bethany. I won't go into a lot of detail, but we began to have people coming out as summer visitors. We began to have people coming out and trying to commute into New Haven, or to Seymour, or to Naugatuck. Matter of fact, by 1920, the census statistics show that lots of people were not living in town and not working in town. Usually we think everybody milked cows here until 1950. That's not true. And people started moving up. This particular section of road is one of the, I can spot it exactly where it is today. This is a piece of Litchfield Turnpike just south, by just south I mean a few hundred feet south of Bethany Town line. And this is what you were faced with in the springtime. And believe me, roads were dusty in the summer, they were muddy in the springtime, people couldn't wait for paving. That was a big, big push. This particular picture shows Clifford Whitlock and his car in 1918, either 1917 or 1918. He was one of the early people to move out, to have his store down at Broadway, but want to drive up and live on Litchfield Turnpike in Bethany. Remember, this 1917 is only 10 years after the last stagecoach went by there. 10 years from the stagecoach to the automobile. However, the stagecoaches had a little better luck than the automobile. This is the same location, the same year. It's either 1917 or 1918. This was not a typical Bethany road. This was much better. 1918 is the year that Amity Road first got paved. I'm not exactly sure how much of it was paved. Litchfield Turnpike still remained like that. Road certainly wasn't suitable for the Model T. If you've noticed this old building at the corner of it's now Amity Road. I have to come up to the 20th century. It's a little tough sometimes. And Route 42, this is the old Doolittle Garage. Actually, it was called the Elm-shaped Garage. It was a big elm tree off to the left. And they sold Model Ts in the 1920s. They sold Plymouths. They sold Hudsons. I can remember when Hudson cars were sold from here in the 1950s. Probably some of you can too. In addition to the automobile, now we have mass transit. No, we no longer have the stagecoaches, but we have jitneys and we have buses. Jitneys were kind of like, I guess you'd call them informal taxi cabs. And there was a regular bus route through Bethany on Amity Road. And although the buses have been gone for nearly 30 years, all the bus stop signs are still there. This photograph was taken last week. The State Department of Transportation hasn't figured it out yet, and I kind of like it. Probably nobody's ever noticed it. I don't know how many of you driving along Amity Road at the corner of Falls Road. On the west side of the road, there's a pair of signs. There's also a pair of signs on the east that are still there. Not even, and they're in perfect condition. If one of them's missing, I'll know it's one of you that took it. As part of improving roads, getting Connecticut out of the mud, which was kind of a byword of the farmers and grangers, Amity Road and Litchfield Turnpike were improved. In order to improve Amity Road, it really didn't need much straightening except, as mentioned before, the old Amity Road section. However, it did need widening, which necessitated such things as moving the Dayton House, moving the Congregational Church back from the road, moving Center Schoolhouse back from the road, and in this case, moving the old Dewdrop Inn back from the road. And hard to believe it was even closer than now. Looks like they were still in business, you know, nothing interrupts business. Okay, this particular section just shows you Amity Road and Old Amity Road veering off Pleasant View Garages to your left. I guess I'm not going to move a little faster because you're close to sleep here. What I did want to point out is when these changes took place, for instance, when Litchfield Turnpike was straightened, some pieces of the road were abandoned, and it's kind of interesting. This particular piece of road just below me on the old Litchfield Turnpike is almost exactly where you saw that Model T mired in the mud. The town line signpost is still here. The sign is long gone. And it's kind of interesting the way nature reclaims. Even though the pavement was never removed, gradually the road is kind of reverting to a forest. Well, nature has the last laugh. This particular section of Route 42, Cheshire Road between Amity Road and the Litchfield Turnpike, was also improved. It's the only section of state road in Bethany at that time that was not included in either Route 63 or Route 69. And just that little section connected to it. Later on, it became a part of Route 42. This is, of course, our one traffic light in Bethany. And I suppose while we're here, we better talk about place names. This is Pine Tree Corner. You can see the pine trees are still there. Also called Basham's Corner. Not simply for the fact that there were more accidents on this corner than any other corner in town before the advent of the traffic light, but because a family by the name of Basham lived here. Just east of here on Cheshire Road, Route 42, just to show you what kind of a beautiful road it is. This is a state road, but it is really quite beautiful, especially this time of year. Interestingly enough, this section of road has not been paved for all that many years. It wasn't until I think the late 50s or early 60s that this had pavement. It was a narrow gravel road until then. Hard to believe. Okay, talking about town roads, we're going to look at a couple of classifications of town roads. There are certain town roads that have been kind of disused and are not maintained. This particular one is a section of Myers Road that was not particularly visible until the water company started using it to twitch logs out. It's the section between the old cemetery and Old Mill Road, for those of you who are familiar with any of the old roads in Bethany. Very scenic area. I've been told that this road was sometimes called a noise cutoff. Anybody that can correct me on that or corroborate, I would greatly appreciate it. Anybody that wants to correct me or has any information, please do it discreetly at the end. This particular beautiful road is Bear Hill Road, north of Hinman Road, as it leads down to the Chatfield Mill Pond. It's a delightful place to walk. Not used by vehicles anymore. This is the Chatfield Mill. I just thought I'd throw this in here because it shows the same road as it looked in 1906. This particular photograph is dated. You don't always get dated photographs. And you probably can't see it, but this is the mill. The mill pond is over there, and there is a carriage just crossing the bridge. This particular spot today is easily as beautiful as it was then. These are the abutments to the bridge, which was taken down only a few years back. Perhaps eventually we'll get a little footbridge back there for pedestrian use. Some roads were abandoned by the town. This is a section of road that looks like a driveway. It's off of Brookwood Road, but it's really a part of the old Perkins Road that was abandoned by the town in 1918. Later on, a subdivision was created, and part of Perkins Road, a small part of the western end of Perkins Road was incorporated into it, and I'm kind of glad they revived or kept the name. This hardly looks like a road at all, and that's because it isn't. This is a road that was again abandoned by the town in the early part of the century. Town meeting voted they didn't want the road anymore. This was called Miller Lane. It went between Bear Hill Road, just south of Clay Road, to Miller Road. And the only thing you can tell, unfortunately this photograph doesn't show it, is there are parallel stone walls. Okay, by the way, at that same time, that same meeting, to give you an idea of how little population there was at Bethany, one of the items on the call of the town meeting was to abandon all of Miller Road. So can you imagine that? Many of you may live on Miller Road or off Miller Road. Yeah, that was a thought at that time. I put this in here. This is Bethany's existing road grader because we're going to be getting into road improvements and improving roads. In the old days involved the road scraper, later on a road grader. And if you look at the old town reports, every year one of the big expenditures was parts for the road scrapers. The town didn't own very much equipment, but it always owned a scraper, and it was pulled by teams of horses or oxen. And of course, scraping roads can wear down the blades. And this is, I don't know if this is our second. The grader, of course, doesn't have to be pulled by horses. And this is either our second or third grader. I really don't know the answer to that. But we still have it, although it's not used. Hasn't been used in a number of years. Probably dates from the early 1950s. The reason I put this here is to show you, I don't know if any of you can recall the fact that we don't drive on Bethany roads the way we did 30 or 40 years ago. 30 or 40 years ago, this road would look different. This has just been repaved with oil and sand, the typical pavement, it's Valley Road, and you see 3 wear tracks. And this has been paved so recently that it doesn't have the line down the middle. There now is a line. This was probably several weeks ago. At least I think it was. This section of Valley Road shows that people are driving in with their left-hand wheel, whichever lane you're in the center of the road, right on the white line or where the white line should be. Before that, 30, 40 years ago, we always drove in the center of the road. When you met a car, you pulled off. This is the old way you drove on a gravel road. When the pavement came, we didn't change our habits. And if you look at the older roads, I think you would find that that's the case. In the 60s, we started putting a stripe down the middle of the road and people suddenly changed their habits. We didn't completely shift over to a right-hand and left-hand lane, but we kind of worked out a compromise, and this is it. This 1868 map is the most accurate one of mid-19th century Bethany from the Deer's Atlas. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, and you probably are familiar with this because it's fairly common, although it's become more collectible and more expensive. But this is the one that lists the Litchfield Turnpike or the Waterbury Road and Bear Hill Road. Those are the only names on the map of all the roads. However, it has all of the names of the people who lived in the houses, and it has every house. There's a dot for every house that was in town in 1868, name of the owner. And we can use the names of the owners to try and identify how roads got their names. We're not going to talk about every road in town, but obviously this Munson house is on Munson Road. The present Durley farm. We really cheated taking photographs this time of year and getting all these colors. Even if you don't like what I have to say, you've got to admit these photographs are not bad. This is Munson. I couldn't resist this one. This is Munson Road coming up to the fog-shrouded Amity Road. Looks kind of like something from the Twilight Zone. The Brooks house, originally an Andrews house on Brooks Road. Now owned by the Posse. And this is another look at Brooks Road, looking east, and this particular dirt road here that goes up to West Rock is Sanford Road. And less than 10 years ago, this was abandoned by the town. It was given to the Water Authority, but a trail was established over it so hikers can get to the regicides, Quinnipiac trails on the top of West Rock using this. Another road identification, maybe some of you know, some of you don't. This is a big level field on Fairwood Road, owned by the Woodward family. They still call it the Fair Lot. Why? Because the Amity and Woodbridge agricultural expositions were held here for many years. From before the Civil War till nearly the turn of the century. Every year, large fairs were held. Sometimes they were held in Woodbridge, sometimes in Bethany. When they were held in Bethany, this was the location. A nice field for the fair. Land was owned by the Woodwards, hence Fairwood Road. The Peck family lived at the corner of Peck Road and Fairwood Road. Prominent family. This property is presently owned by the Garceaus, I believe. But they gave their name to the road. Many roads got their name this way, and I don't think we have to list them all. Whitting Hill Road. This fine painting by Tony Falcone shows the Whitting Homestead. Painting by Harold Rabinowitz shows the road and the old barn. The bridge here, Will, or Bob, will take care of the tape recorder. Does this mean I've said all I'm allowed to say? Okay, we'll speed it up a little bit. This is the Hoadley Road Bridge. Hoadley family, several generations of Hoadley family lived here and conducted prosperous grist sawmills on this location. Willing Hill Road is in the background. Davidson's Corner today. Davidsons haven't lived there for 40 years, but it's still Davidson's Corner. On a recent map, if you find an atlas of New Haven County, look up Bethany, you'll find Davidson's Corner in big red print as large as Bethany. Anyone from away would think that it was a separate village. So we keep our traditions here at Bethany. Lebanon Road. Now we're getting away from family names. Now we have kind of a, well, it's a biblical association, I guess, the Cedars of Lebanon. Lebanon Swamp is just to the north of this intersection, an area with large numbers of arborvitae or white cedar. I can't remember why this is here. I guess we're looking at Valley Road, and it's a valley. Boy, that's not all that creative, is it? This was this brook, which is the Sergeant River, headwaters of the Sergeant River, often called Creamery Brook. I know my mother always called it that. I particularly like this on Old Amity Road at the corner of Myers Road. There's a group of boulders, and this area has been known for maybe centuries as Rocky Corner. This was the site of the very first schoolhouse in Bethany, Rocky Corner. Let's see, this isn't the one with the curtains, is it? I gotta figure out why we took this one. Will, why did we take this one?
Bucks Hill.
What's that?
Bucks Hill.
Okay. This is looking east on Falls Road, and Pole Hill Road is going to be off to your right down here somewhere. It's a very steep hill, and it's known as Bucks Hill, supposedly because it was much steeper in an early period, and this caused horses to flood. We're looking down now at the Amity Road. It used to be the Litchfield Turnpike, remember? This is the section where you're looking toward Naugatuck, through the straits where you've got mountains on both sides. Edwards Road is to your right here, called Johnny Gidd Road in the old days. And just to the west is Little Beacon Road. That's a sign for the Arrowhead Grove owned by the Rostelskis. This section of Schaefer Road looking east, one word assures me was called in the old days Gould Thread Road. If anybody can corroborate or correct me on that, I would appreciate it. But I think it's worth saving these kind of things because once they're lost, they're lost. Especially the names that are kind of inexplicable. Inexplicable names. Well, why did we take this one?
Poplar Swamp.
Okay.
Not inexplicable.
What we're looking at here is Poplar Swamp Road, which I like because it's a nice, honest name. You know, a lot of the names today are kind of phony, but Poplar Swamp tells it like it is. We're looking up at Bear Hill Road, and there's the hill. I want you to know, Will and I went through 160 slides to pick these out for you tonight. But believe me, we don't have 160, so we had to justify each one. We had a lot of arguments. Here we are at the intersection of Bear Hill and Clay, previously called Clay Pit Road because of the clay pits in the vicinity. The area north of Clay Pit Road, at one time there was a movement, mostly on the part of Bruce Robertson. Some people remember Bruce Robertson. To have the name changed to Prince Road, that never came to pass. Our bin in Miller Lane is just to our left here. Okay, here's a view looking west on Hilldale Road, very beautiful road. And Will and I stopped to take a photograph of this, and wouldn't you know it, 24 turkeys crossed the road here. 24 turkeys. That's as many turkeys as I've ever seen in Bethany. Probably be fewer around Thanksgiving time. All right, this particular road, this area name, it's Bethmore Road, which is not a problem. You know, Bethany and Seymour. I think we can figure that out. But this area has been known for a long, long time as Squabble Hill. And this is even before the Bethany Farm subdivision. As a matter of fact, I think Timer Downs in his office has a postcard addressed to Clifton Roche, the old tax collector back in the 1950s, I guess. And it's simply addressed Cliff Roche, Squabble Hill, Bethany, and it got through. Is that right, Timer? Okay. I always need people to corroborate. This area in southeast Bethany is the area between High Rock and Madmere Mountain, known as the Bethany Gap. One time it was known as Thompson's Gap. Nothing to do with David, wherever you are. It's a site of trailheads for the Quinnipiac Trail. Another area that's kind of interesting, this is the corner of Hoadley Road and Litchfield Turnpike. There used to be a big button ball or sycamore tree here. It's called Button Ball Corner, and it marked the 10 miles from the New Haven Green. And it's extremely large and famous. Okay, we're moving on now. Believe it or not, we're getting near the end. I realize I'm the only thing standing between you and refreshments. And so I think an excellent target. Prior to World War II, to the best of my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but discreetly and later, the only subdivision of land that resulted in a new road, although not a town road, was Woods Road, Bethany Wood. We always call it Bethany Woods. Woods Road is a newer name here. And it was a community of homes that were developed with a concept that there be a considerable amount of cooperation among the people in the area. Probably still is. This particular photo is of one of our most recent subdivisions, Pinebrook Crossing. It's just kind of pretty. It shows the area in the background, some of which is the area that would be occupied by the Bethany Farms subdivision. The so-called Holmes Ford or Fort Rocks is probably over the brow of the hill there. This is a kind of winding up. We want to show you a little bit about some of the roads in Bethany. I wish we had time for more. I don't want to give you the idea that the only scenic roads in Bethany are old abandoned roads with lots of leaves on them. The roads that you drive every day are something to be treasured and enjoyed, and something to appreciate as a historical artifact. This particular one, if I'm not mistaken, is Little Beacon Road. Is that right, Will?
Yep.
Okay, good. Nothing like corroborate. Even if it wasn't, he would have said yes. Another one that those of you who live in the area around Old Mill Road might recognize this. There's no vehicles beyond this point. The pavement just kind of peters out to nothing. And there's a beautiful network of roads in there for the hiker or biker. This particular road is Atwater Road, looking east, I guess, from the end of the improvement or whatever improvement there is. And it's again, I wouldn't advise driving over it, but it's an excellent road for passive recreation and probably should be kept for that purpose. part of Schiff Road that's no longer used for vehicles. It's way too steep. A turnaround has been made up here at the end of Schiff Road. This is extremely steep. I can remember toboggans down there when I was younger and had less intelligence, less fear. This particular photograph is kind of nice. It's of Carrington Road, the Eisenman's residence. We certainly have some rural character here. Here's Myers Road at the very termination of the pavement. Nobody says that you can't have beauty. I'm not saying you can't have pavement, but this particular area of Elsie Halter's farm is particularly attractive. One more. You know how long it took for me to get the darn cows to do that?
Is there anybody here that had their road missed? So be brave, Bob. Right now we're looking for basically we're working on the guy that owns more houses than anybody else in town. No, we haven't had a place to live. We're looking. I have a couple things coming up now that we've heard the expertise of Mr. Brinton. He will be at the Henry Junior High meeting 26th.
You have it.
Tuesday,
Next
7:30 to
Tuesday.
8:30. This is History of Bethany. Bob's presenting that twice.
Part 1 and Part 2.
Part 1 and Part 2. There's no charge for that, by the way. It's a free collection.
I think they
Accepting
do want
tips
you to
later.
register.
Yes, they did run.
On Wednesday, October 27th, in the footsteps of the old Leatherman, will be over at the Miller Memorial Library, and that's over in Hampton, Batesville Avenue, 8 o'clock. A lot of you have heard the Leatherman stories and so forth, and that's going to be presented again. On Tuesday, the 16th, a Connecticut Farm and Family Food Centuries. This is going to be an illustrated talk at Thomas Starling Farms, Woodbridge Historical Society, in Hampton. And that's at 7:30. And that's going to be at the Woodbridge Center. Do we have any other announcements? Basically. Anybody else have anything? How about something else to bring up to the society? Improvements. Where can we get bigger needs? This is great. Nice to know that a lot of people are thinking along the same lines. I think we're well on our way to something bigger and better. With that, I'd like to welcome you to refreshments over here. And Mr. Coyle, Mr. Mendez, would you like to say something?
My name is Don Menzies, and I'm Vice President of the Indian Woodbridge Historical Society. And as a previous 12-year resident of Bethany, and on behalf of the board from Woodbridge, I'd just like to say this organization has certainly come of age, and it's probably long overdue. We applaud your efforts, and we wish to extend our heartiest congratulations, and any expertise, anything you need from us, we gladly will willingly give, and as our town's histories are inextricably linked, we hope that our historical societies will be able to learn from one another for many years to come. So you really have our greatest and heartiest congratulations.
Thank you very much. We also received a letter from the Orange Historical Society congratulating us on conception. Nobody has anything else, I'll accept the motion. All in favor? Thank you very much.
Is it still on?
We've been on for a while. Get some people going out. We're back out of the way. Pretty good.
I'll see it. I will.
Oh, wait, no, neither do I. You mean the first guy with the beard? Yeah, with the beard. Thank you. Nice meeting. Nice meeting you. Welcome to Brown. Thank you.
I love her. She wants,
Talked about that, doing it. I was going to do it, never did it.
Really?
I just heard there were a lot of people.
Yeah, I know.
Reports are almost ready. And they'll, I took the reports yesterday when he was smoking.
There's an old road, and is that your father?
Yeah. Oh, is that the one he was talking about?
Yeah, with the, and he said it's called Old Mill Road?
not sure what we were looking for that. I think it might have been.
It just ends?
Yeah. Because I've never used to go through, but I think that area there was real. I'm not sure exactly what it came out. I think that might have been messed up on the Bear Hill side. That's preserved, but I think it might have been something else on the other side.
Like a house? Yeah. I'm trying to think. Well, I saw a road and it said Squire Road, and he said no, that's just the new development road that they just put in.
It's just south. Actually, Squire Road is right on the old road, and the property there. Yeah, it's just north. It's between Squire and Clay.
Right, and you can see it down in there. The trees growing up and everything, but I just wondered where it came out. Okay, I just wondered if maybe it even curved around and came off on the corner across from Chris's farm or something. Where, I mean, there's roads in there now, but that's new.
Yeah,
but,
that's
yeah. But,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, because there used to be an old road that went up in there, but I think that was just the family who lived in that white house in the corner. Yeah. Yeah. And then there looks like there's some wood roads in between. Well, the corner there and that little hill. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure. I won't answer it right now.
I tried to find out where that road, the Bear Hill, Miller Lane, where it comes out on Miller Road.
I don't know. I never followed it. I really don't know. It doesn't show.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't tell you. I've never walked it.
Okay. But it did come through at one time.
Connected through, yeah. Miller Lane.
Maybe I'll walk there. Where are the clay pits on the Clay Road?
There were clay pits near Clay and Bethany. In fact, one of them, I can remember when there used to be a pond there. As I remember it, I think the clay pits were at the southwest corner.